The night sky above the orphanage was calm, filled with distant stars. The children inside laughed, chasing each other through the narrow halls, their small footsteps echoing on the polished floor. A human caretaker sat near the window, humming a soft song, believing the galaxy was finally quiet after years of conflict. She did not know that death was already on its way, carried on alien warships hidden in the darkness above. The first explosion ripped through the sky like thunder. Fire spread across the orphanage roof, breaking glass and raining steel upon the children. Screams filled the air as alien bombs kept falling, tearing apart walls that once protected the innocent. The humans inside had no soldiers, no shields, only bare hands to try and save the young. The aliens had chosen this target not for strategy, but for cruelty. They believed destroying the weak would break humanity's spirit forever, but they were wrong. Survivors crawled out of the rubble, their faces covered with ash and tears, their voices filled with rage. Soldiers from nearby stations rushed to the burning site, staring in silence at the small bodies they could not save. A commander, his fists shaking, whispered a single vow under his breath. This is no longer a war of defense. This is a war of vengeance. And with that, humanity's heart turned to fire. Across the fleet, messages were sent. Images of the destroyed orphanage spread like wildfire. Fathers and mothers saw the faces of dead children. Old veterans clenched their fists, demanding revenge. Young recruits who had never seen battle begged for a weapon in their hands. The bombing had not broken humanity's spirit. It had forged it into something stronger, harder, and unshakable. The galaxy was about to see a side of humans that no enemy had ever survived. The alien leaders celebrated in their cold halls, believing their strike had brought fear. They raised their glasses, laughing at the images of burning buildings and weeping survivors. But deep within space, human warships were already gathering. They were not built for mercy. They were built for destruction. The silence of the fleet's engines carried a deadly promise. The humans were not preparing to negotiate. They were preparing to erase the enemy from the stars. In the command room of the largest battleship, Captain Darius stood with his eyes fixed on the holographic map. His jaw was set, his hands steady, but his heart burned like the wreckage on Earth. He spoke to his officers with a voice sharp as steel. They thought they could kill our children and walk away. They thought wrong. For every child they took, we will take 1,000 of theirs. Around him, the officers stood taller, their eyes glowing with the same fire. The war had changed. This was no longer survival. This was retribution. The first orders were simple. No hesitation, no retreat. Strike where it hurts most. Human fleets jumped into hyperspace, targeting alien fuel depots, shipyards, and colonies. Missiles tore through defenses, lasers burned through armor, and human soldiers stormed the very planets the aliens thought were untouchable. Every move was fueled not by strategy alone, but by the memory of small voices that would never laugh. Again, the galaxy watched in silence as the humans unleashed a storm no one had believed possible. And yet, the enemy was vast. Their fleets were larger, their planets countless, their armies endless. Humanity's strength was not in numbers, it was in spirit. Every battle won was written in blood, every loss carved into memory. The humans were ready to pay any price to see the enemy fall. What the aliens had unleashed was not just war. It was wrath. And this wrath would not stop until the stars themselves were filled with the fire of vengeance. Asterisk. The human fleet spread through the dark like a steel storm. Engines hummed low as ships took their places in perfect lines. Every pilot checked systems twice and then checked again. No one spoke about fear. They spoke about duty. Captain Darius walked the bridge and looked each officer in the eye. He reminded them why they were here. "We fight for the children," he said, and the crew answered as one. The order to begin the counterstrike went out to every ship with A single word that felt like iron. Scouts had traced the bombers to a cluster ruled by a proud alien empire. Their banners were cold blue and bright silver. They called themselves the Varkan. They hid behind thick shields and 1,000 small laws. The fleet learned every route in and every route out. They mapped fuel lanes, repair docks, and private jump corridors. A quiet network of human traders and miners passed coded messages from world to world. The plan was simple to tell and hard to survive. Strike 3 places at once. Hit the shipyards that built the bombers. Hit the relay that carried orders. Hit the bank that paid the mercenaries. If even one attack failed, the others would bleed for nothing. Every crew member knew this and still stepped forward. The carrier wings warmed rail cannons and loaded smart torpedoes. Marines locked armor and checked seal lines with calm hands. Medics lined stretchers in silent rows and prayed they would not be needed. When the jump alarm sounded, stars stretched into silver threads and snapped back to points. The first target hung ahead like a thorn crown around a red dwarf star. It was a ring yard with hundreds of drones and only a few heavy guns. The Varkan believed no one would dare attack so deep. They were wrong. Human fighters poured out like arrows. The first volley cut the yard's power. The second volley cut its voice. The third volley tore open its spine and sent burning metal into the red light. At the same moment, a small human cruiser drifted near the relay moon, dressed as a broken freighter. Varkan patrol ships moved in to inspect. The cruiser opened her side doors and let loose a stream of boarding pods. Marines shot across the dark like meteors. They landed on the relay towers and moved as one. They did not waste shots. They used stun first when they could. They cut cables, planted charges, and took the control room without shouting or panic. When the charges blew, the Varkan command web went silent across 6 systems. The bank was the hardest target. It floated above a gas giant and wore a shell of armor like the skin of a dragon. Human gunships could not break it fast enough, so the fleet used a different weapon. They used truth. Captain Darius opened a broadcast and pushed the full record of the Orphanage strike to every public screen near the bank. Workers stopped at their consoles and watched. Some were Varkan civilians who had never seen the bombing up close. They laid down badges and opened maintenance locks. The bank's inner doors slid open from the inside, and human sappers went to work. The 3 blows landed within 1 hour. The galaxy felt the shock. Varkan commanders stared at dead screens and burning accounts. Their admirals shouted that humans were savages. Their traitors whispered that humans were precise. On the bridge, Darius did not smile. He looked at the names of lost pilots and read each one aloud. He ordered rescue ships back to the ring yard to pull any wounded from drifting hulls, Varkan or human. The message to the crew was clear. Total war did not mean blind hate. It meant total resolve. Then a 4th signal arrived. It carried a voice from an old friend on a frontier station. The friend said a rumor had spread through black markets and back channels. A Varkan warlord had ordered the Orphanage strike to force a bigger war. He wanted chaos to help him seize the throne. He paid smugglers to mark the building as a military site and then used the lie to justify the bombs. The name that kept appearing was short and sharp. It was Kethran. He ruled from a fortress on a cold moon that few ships ever reached. Darius stood over the star map and placed a marker on the moon. He did not order a blind rush. He ordered patience. The fleet would set a trap. They would let Kethran believe humans were finished after the first strikes. They would bait him into sending a victory parade to a border world. While his fleet marched, a small human task force would slip behind and cut the fortress from power, air, and signal. Then they would land and take him alive to face the galaxy with his crimes laid bare. Preparation filled the next hours. Engineers rebuilt fighters from scrap. Pilots who had lost partners sat quiet, and checked their new wings. Marines studied maps of the cold moon and memorized every tunnel and hatch. Darius sent one more message across human space. He told the families of the fallen that justice was moving, and it would not stop. When the final checks were done, the fleet dimmed lights to battle red. The stars outside looked like a field of white embers. The task force turned toward the moon where Kethran waited, and the jump countdown began. The human task force dropped out of hyperspace on the edge of a frozen system. The moon of Kethran, black and sharp against a dying star, hung ahead like a blade waiting to fall. The fortress built into its surface glowed with faint lines of power. Towers of steel rose above craters, and defense guns tracked the sky like watchful eyes. Captain Darius stood at the forward window of his ship, watching the enemy stronghold. His voice was steady when he spoke. "This is where they think they are safe. This is where we will show them no walls can stop justice." The bridge crew sat silent, every hand steady on controls. The plan unfolded like a blade slipping from its sheath. Human ships split into 3 groups. 2 squadrons circled wide to draw the gaze of the fortress. They sent out false signals that mimicked larger fleets, fooling Varkan radars. The 3rd squad, carrying the Marines, stayed low, hidden in the shadows of broken asteroids. Engines ran cool, and weapons stayed cold to avoid detection. Every second of silence felt like a hammer pounding in the chest, but no one broke focus. They all remembered the faces of the children. They all knew why they were here. On the moon's surface, Varkan soldiers marched with discipline. They wore armor like black glass, and their banners waved in the icy wind. They thought Kethran's fortress was unbreakable. Inside the command tower, Kethran himself watched reports of the human attacks on shipyards and banks. He sneered at the losses. "Let them burn what they can," he said to his lieutenants. "They do not know the depth of our power. They cannot reach me here." His voice was cold, his smile sharp. He believed humans were only noise before his rise to the throne. He did not see the shadow creeping toward him. The marine pods launched silent as arrows. They cut through the thin atmosphere and landed in the cracks between ridges. Teams moved with slow care, their suits blending with rock and snow. They carried rifles but used blades when they could, to keep the silence. One squad climbed a frozen cliff and found an air vent. They cut through with heat saws no louder than a whisper. Another squad crossed a field of sensors, moving only when the wind howled to hide their steps. The humans advanced inch by inch, like hunters closing in on prey. In orbit, the false fleets made their move. The 2 human squadrons lit their engines and attacked the outer guns. Explosions sparked across the fortress walls. Alarms howled inside, and Varkan soldiers rushed to stations. They believed the main attack had begun. Massive cannons fired into space, chasing the decoys. Kethran leaned forward in his chair, barking orders to focus fire on the ships above. He did not know the real strike was already inside his gates. Marines breached the lower hangars in silence. They cut through guards before alarms could sound. Drones were hacked and turned against their masters. A team secured the power core, placing charges on every line. Another locked down the communication hub, jamming all outbound signals. Then came the signal every squad waited for, a short flash on the visor, green. The fortress was blind and half-deaf. The humans had their opening. Captain Darius ordered the next stage with only 2 words: begin ascent. His voice echoed like iron. The Marines stormed the inner halls, moving in pairs and covering every corner. Gunfire rang through the fortress, echoing like thunder in the steel caverns. Varkan soldiers tried to hold lines, but their discipline faltered when the lights died and the doors sealed against them. Humans fought with steady rage, each step forward earned by blood and fire. In one chamber, a young Marine carried a wounded comrade across the floor while firing with his free hand. The fight was not clean. It was raw. filled with the weight of vengeance and the fire of survival. At last, the Marines reached the central tower. Catherine's personal guard stood waiting, tall and armored in silver, their blades crackling with energy. The clash was brutal. Sparks flew as steel met alien glass. Marines fought in tight lines, pushing inch by inch through the guard. Some fell, but the others pressed on. The sound of every strike carried the memory of the orphanage. The last guard dropped, and the doors to the throne chamber cracked open. Inside, Catherine sat on a black chair carved from stone, a blade across his knees and a smile on his lips. He looked at the humans as if they were dust. "You came so far only to die," he said. The Marines leveled rifles, but Captain Darius raised a hand. He wanted Catherine alive. "No," he said. "You will not die quick. You will face every world and answer for what you did." Catherine's smile faded for the first time. He rose with his blade, ready to fight. The Marines closed around him in a ring. Outside, the fortress burned, and in orbit, the human fleet held the line against waves of reinforcements. The battle for the moon had begun, and the fate of both sides hung in the balance. The throne chamber shook as explosions rolled through the fortress walls. Dust fell from the ceiling, and the glow of burning towers bled through the broken windows. Captain Darius stood firm, his eyes locked on Catherine. The alien warlord raised his blade, its edge humming with deadly light. The Marines tightened their circle, rifles aimed, but Darius raised his hand once more. "Alive," he repeated. The order was clear. Catherine would not be granted the mercy of a swift death. He would live long enough to face the truth of his crimes. Catherine lunged forward with the speed of a predator. His blade slashed arcs of white fire, cutting the air with sharp shrieks. Marines blocked with steel shields, sparks bursting with every strike. 2 soldiers went down, their armor sliced open, but the line held. Darius stepped in himself, drawing a heavy combat staff. He caught Catherine's blade mid-swing, the clash echoing like thunder in the chamber. The alien warlord snarled, his strength immense, but Darius's grip did not break. The two locked eyes, one filled with arrogance, the other with unshakable fire. The fight raged across the chamber floor. Marines moved with precision, forcing Catherine to turn again and again, wearing him down. He struck like a beast, but every strike grew slower. His smile twisted into frustration as the humans pressed harder. A final blow from Darius cracked his wrist, sending the blade spinning across the floor. Before Catherine could reach it, 3 Marines pinned him to the ground. Shackles clamped around his arms, glowing with dampening fields. For the first time, Catherine's voice cracked. "You think this will end me?" he hissed, but no one answered. His words had no power in that chamber anymore. While the Marines secured the prisoner, the fortress groaned from within. Explosions rattled deeper as human charges blew through power cores. Flames crawled along the walls, and systems sparked out. Overcomes, a Marine officer reported heavy Varkan reinforcements closing in from orbit. Human decoy fleets were holding, but losses were mounting. Darius gave a short, sharp order. "All teams exfil. Take the warlord with you." The Marines moved fast, dragging Catherine through broken halls toward the extraction bay. Every shadow hid another enemy, every corner a chance for ambush. The fortress defenders regrouped in desperation. Dozens of Varkan soldiers poured into the halls, firing blindly in rage. The Marines moved with cold precision, covering each other, falling back in tight formation. One soldier carried the warlord over his shoulder like dead weight, ignoring his curses and threats. Gunfire lit the corridors, echoing like storm winds. Step by step, the humans carved a path back toward the landing pods. Behind them, fire consumed the fortress that had once stood as Catherine's symbol of power. It would stand no longer. At the same time in orbit, The battle had reached its peak. Human destroyers clashed against larger alien cruisers, their hulls groaning under the strain. One by one, human pilots gave their lives to keep the skies open for the Marines below. Fighter wings dove into enemy lines, torpedoes cutting through shields, engines burning bright until nothing was left but sparks. The fleet fought not for victory alone, but to give the ground teams the time they needed. Every second bought with blood brought Darius closer to extraction. The Marines burst into the hangar where their pods waited. Sirens wailed, and the floor shook under the impact of enemy fire. Darius ordered the prisoner locked into the central pod, his chains sealed into the bulkhead. "He will not escape," he said. The warlord spat curses in his alien tongue, but his eyes betrayed something deeper: fear. For the first time, he saw that humanity would not stop. The Marines sealed the pod doors and launched into the sky just as the fortress collapsed in flames behind them. The pods shot upward through smoke and fire, punching past the atmosphere into the cold black of space. Enemy fighters pursued, streaks of plasma cutting the void. But the human fleet opened a wall of covering fire, burning the pursuers into ash. The pods docked with the flagship, and Darius stepped onto the bridge carrying his prisoner. The crew turned, silent, their eyes fixed on the warlord in chains. Darius raised his voice so all could hear. "This is the one who thought he could break us by killing our children. Now the galaxy will see him for what he is. A coward, a murderer, and soon nothing at all." The bridge erupted in a roar of approval. The fleet turned from the dying moon and vanished into hyperspace, carrying their prize. Behind them, Kethrin's fortress burned into ruin, his power shattered in a single night. Ahead of them lay a trial not fought with weapons, but with truth. Darius knew the war was not yet over. The Varkan Empire would not fall with one capture. But he also knew that humanity had taken the first step in breaking their enemy. The wrath of mankind had been shown, and the galaxy was listening. The return to human space was not silent. The fleet limped through hyperspace with scars across their hulls, fighters reduced to half their wings, and crews carrying the weight of fresh losses. Yet on every ship, there was also a strange fire. They had done the impossible. They had torn a warlord from the heart of his fortress and carried him back in chains. For the first time since the Orphanage bombing, the galaxy whispered that perhaps humanity was not the victim of war, but its storm. Captain Darius stood on the command deck and looked at the stars ahead. "Now," he said, "we show the galaxy what justice looks like." His words carried through the fleet like thunder. The prisoner was locked in the deepest chamber of the flagship. Guards lined every corridor, rifles in hand, and no door opened without Darius's code. Kethrin paced inside his cell like a caged predator. His golden eyes still burned with arrogance, but his words now rang hollow. "Your people are weak," he spat at the guards. "Your fleet will crumble. My empire is eternal." But the guards only stared back with steady silence. They had seen his fortress burn. They had seen his blade knocked from his hand. No boast could erase that truth. When the fleet reached Earth's orbit, the news spread faster than light. Cities lit their towers in blue and gold, the colors of remembrance. Screens across colonies showed the image of Kethrin in chains, flanked by human Marines. Families who had lost children in the Orphanage bombing fell to their knees, tears streaming down their faces. Crowds gathered in silence, then broke into cries of rage and pride. Humanity had not been broken. Humanity had struck back, and the galaxy was watching. Every world whispered the same thought. If humans could bring down Kethrin, then perhaps no empire was beyond their reach. The trial was set in the Grand Assembly, a hall that floated above Earth's oceans like a shining crown. Leaders from allied worlds were invited to watch. Even neutral species sent envoys, drawn by the shock of Kethrin's capture. Some came in fear, others in respect, but all came to see what humans would do next. On the day of the trial, the hall filled with a sea of voices. Light shone down on the central platform where Kethrong was chained. He looked around at the gathering and for the first time felt small. His empire could not shield him here. "Captain." Darius walked forward to speak. His voice carried through every speaker, calm but sharp. He told the story of the orphanage bombing, showing the images of rubble and the faces of the lost children. He told how the fleet had risen not for conquest, but for justice. He laid bare the proof of Kethrong's plot, the smuggler codes, the secret orders, the betrayal of his own people. Each word was a blade, and each blade cut through the lies Kethrong had built around himself. The hall grew silent, the weight of truth pressing on every soul. The alien warlord tried to shout over it, but his voice broke under the mountain of evidence. When the verdict was spoken, it rang like steel. Guilty. The word carried across the galaxy, echoed on every broadcast. The humans had not executed him on the spot. They had not hidden him in shadows. They had shown his crimes to all and let the galaxy judge. Some envoys were shaken by the restraint. Others saw it as strength greater than any weapon. For while Kethrong's body was chained, his name was broken forever. His empire had lost its blade, and with it, its pride. Darius looked at the gathered leaders and spoke again. "You thought we were fragile. You thought killing our children would make us kneel. Now you know. We are not fragile, we are fire." The hall erupted in shouts of support, but the war was not over. The Varkan Empire, humiliated by the capture of their warlord, vowed vengeance. Their fleets gathered at border systems, preparing to strike harder than ever before. Messages poured into human command. Colonies braced for invasion. All eyes asked if humanity would stand or fall. Darius called his officers together and drew a line across the star map. "They will come," he said. "But this time, we will not wait. We will not fight for one orphanage, or one planet, or one system. We will fight for all of them. And when we strike, the galaxy will know the meaning of total war." His officers nodded, their eyes hard as iron. In the dark of his cell, Kethrong laughed bitterly, though his chains rattled with every shake. "You think capturing me wins your war? You have only lit the fire. My people will come for you, and when they do, no child will be safe." But outside the walls, human soldiers trained harder than ever. Engineers built weapons faster than ever, and fleets gathered like storm clouds. Kethrong's threats fell into the void, swallowed by the roar of humanity preparing for the greatest battle yet. The war was far from finished, and every soldier knew it, but none doubted the outcome anymore. Humanity had awakened, and nothing could put that fire back to sleep. Asterisk. The stars burned bright as fleets gathered across human space. Shipyards worked without pause, engines roared through the night, and soldiers stood in endless lines awaiting deployment. Every colony sent volunteers, young and old, their voices united in a single vow: never again would children be left unprotected. The bombing of the orphanage had not broken humanity. It had bound them together into a single weapon sharper than steel. Captain Darius stood on the command deck of the flagship, watching the map of the galaxy fill with red enemy markers. His voice carried like fire when he spoke. "We do not wait for them to come. We strike first. And we do not stop until the Varkan Empire is ash." The first move was swift and merciless. Human fleets swept into border systems, hammering garrisons that had once terrorized unarmed colonies. Torpedoes cut through space stations, rail cannons tore battleships apart, and marine squads landed on strongholds with precision strikes. Civilians who once feared the Empire now cheered as human banners were raised. The message spread faster than light. Humanity had declared total war. And total war did not mean a single battle. It meant a storm that would not end until every trace of the enemy was erased. But the Varkan did not crumble easily. Their fleets were vast, their factories deep within fortified worlds, and their admirals cunning. They launched counterstrikes, burning through human colonies on the edge of space. Cities fell, and many lives were lost. Yet each loss only added fuel to the fire. Recruits poured in by the millions, and old war veterans returned to service. Human engineers built new weapons out of desperation, crafting railguns larger than ever before, and shields that drank fire instead of breaking under it. Every wound made humanity stronger, every scar another reason to fight. In the Grand Assembly, neutral worlds watched with growing unease. Some whispered that humanity had become as dangerous as the empire they fought. But others saw a difference. Where the Varkan ruled with chains, humans fought for survival and justice. Where the empire silenced voices, humans spread truth of every battle. They shared footage of the orphanage, of Catherine's trial, of soldiers holding the line not for conquest but for the young, the weak, and the forgotten. Slowly worlds began to turn. Small fleets that had once bowed to the empire quietly slipped away and joined the humans. The balance of the war began to shift. Catherine, chained in his cell, could only watch the reports that reached him. His golden eyes burned with fury, but he saw the truth. His empire was cracking, piece by piece, under the weight of the humans' relentless fire. He tried to taunt his guards, spitting words of doom. Your species is reckless. You burn too. Bright, you will collapse before us. But the guards did not answer. They knew what he did not want to admit, that the humans had already broken his image of invincibility. His empire feared him less, and feared humanity more. The war reached its peak in the system of Valkor, the heart of the Varkan Empire. There, Grand Fleet gathered, thousands of ships forming a wall of steel and fire. It was the largest force the galaxy had ever seen. Human scouts sent back the images, and for a moment, silence filled every command deck. The enemy was vast, larger than anything the humans could match ship for ship. Yet Darius did not flinch. He stood before his officers, his voice steady. They have more ships, yes. But we have more reason. Every man, every woman, every child lost is with us now. And with that weight behind us, no fleet can stand. His words spread across the armada, lifting spirits like a rising tide. The battle began with fire that lit the system like a second sun. Waves of alien cruisers surged forward, their cannons burning holes through human lines. But the humans did not break. Fighter wings darted like knives through the gaps, targeting engines and fuel lines. Destroyers drew enemy fire while heavy carriers unleashed barrages that split the dark. Every ship fought as if the memory of the orphanage was carved into their hearts. Losses were heavy, but every sacrifice carved deeper wounds into the enemy wall. Hours stretched into days, and still the humans pressed on. At last Darius gave the order for the final strike. A wedge of human ships formed, their engines burning at full power. They drove straight into the heart of the enemy line, smashing through shields, tearing apart command ships, and splitting the Grand Fleet in two. The Varkan line shattered, their admiral ships burning, their formation broken. Across the system, human ships roared in victory, the fire of vengeance blazing across every world that watched. The war was not over, but the Empire's spine had snapped. For the first time in history, the Varkan fled before humanity. When the smoke cleared, the humans stood bloodied but unbroken. The galaxy had witnessed their wrath, their strength, and their will. The orphanage was avenged, but the war had become something greater. It was not just about vengeance anymore. It was about survival, freedom, and the right to live without fear. Darius stood on the bridge, the stars burning ahead of him, and whispered words that echoed across the fleet. We were forged in grief. Now we rise in fire. And this war will end only when the galaxy is free. The crew stood in silence, then answered with a single word that shook the walls. Humanity. And with that, The fleet turned to finish the war once and for all.